Okay, we have no time to waste because I have 10 amazing wood projects to show you. We're going to get started with this shadow box that I've had in my stash, and I have soaked the paper that was on top of this and am scraping it off with a paint scraper right now to get all of that excess paper off. If you are new here, my name is Natalie and I am the owner and creator behind Sparks of Joy Studio. Welcome back to my channel. I love doing all kinds of thrift flips and DIYs, but my favorite thing to work with is wood. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how I upcycle 10 different projects. Some of them are thrifted, some of them are just made out of scrap wood, and we're going to have a lot of fun today. So let's get the rest of this paper scraped off of this shadow box so we can move on to the next step. I painted that shadow box in Farm Fresh by DIY, and now I'm using my new, well, it's new to me. It's not a new stamp by IOD. It's the distressed stamp that is kind of a full sheet versus the one that has the 4 vintage textures. And I just picked this up off of the paintedphotographer.com, that is Connie's website. And I am trying to create a distressed look, but I'm using white ink. And I will tell you, as soon as I had this on the piece, I was not a fan of how it looked, so I decided to move in a different direction. I ended up covering the entire shadow box in weathered wood and then did some wet distressing back to show off that farm fresh that was underneath. And now I'm going to be creating something to go in the middle of this piece. This is one of Connie Lines and Designs papers. This is Bluebird Multiple and it is available on my website. It comes with 3 different papers in one. You'll get a 5x7 and then I believe it's a 4x5 with this paper. It is $4.95, wonderful price to be able to cover 3 different projects. I'm going to decoupage this onto this little wood cutout that I have that has already been painted in white, and I'm going to be using my Fusion decoupage gel. And my reason for using the decoupage gel today is just to, one, try out something different, just to show you all the different types of decoupage mediums you can use with this paper, but also because I have it in my stash, and today's video is also about using up what I have before I open anything new. As you can see, I am able to lift and lower that paper and reposition it as it was a little bit off center. And once I'm done with that top part, I go back in with my decoupage medium and finish the bottom part. Another thing I want to mention, I am misting my paper as I work through this process. That allows the fibers to loosen up within that paper and helps you avoid any wrinkles. With that said, one of the amazing things about Connie's papers is that they really don't wrinkle at all. I don't think that I've ever, don't quote me on this, but I'm almost positive I have never gotten a wrinkle using any of her papers, even when I use them dry and even when I use them with like a glue stick. So if you are looking into using decoupage or trying decoupage, but you're anxious because of like napkins or other types of decoupage paper are very, very, delicate, this is a great way to get started. And right now I do have an offer available where if you buy any 5 papers, you will get a free gift. So make sure you check that out, sparksofjoystudio.com. I let that decoupage medium dry and now I'm coming in with a finger sander and just working in a downward motion around that little wood cutout to take off all of the excess paper. I do work in a downward motion, but I do find that sometimes ripping that paper across once you have a couple parts of it kind of detached does help. So that is just another kind of added bonus here. The paper is durable enough that you can kind of, I guess, be a little bit more tough with it than maybe some other decoupage paper. Once that's done, I'm going to get some glue and glue it to the middle of my shadow box. Once that glue is dry, I do use Titebond Quick and Thick, which kind of sets up pretty quickly. I come back in with some clear wax and I'm finishing off the entire piece, sealing in that weathered wood that is over the Firm Fresh and sealing that as well as running it over the decoupage paper. I also use some dark wax right around the rim of that beautiful paper just to kind of help it look a little bit more finished. For my next project, I have these little butterflies that I cut out using my laser cutter. I love that the little bellies were cut out too. That actually was an happy accident. It was not what I planned to do, but when it came out that way, I said, you know what, we can make this work. I'm going to start by painting them all in Coal Black by Fusion. Once that paint was dry, I grabbed some iron patina paint by Dixie Belle, and I am painting them all with a coat, letting it dry, then coming in with the second coat. And while that second coat of paint is still a little damp, I'm going to use the Dixie Belle patina spray on them to bring out a rusty kind of look. With this technique, you do need to set aside your project, and I usually do set it aside kind of overnight, which is why you saw me using a cardboard underneath so that I could carry it across to my other part of my room where I could set it aside. While that's drying, I'm going to grab this piece of scrap wood that has been painted in white, and now I'm going to come in with kind of a heavy dry brush using Apothecary by DIY. And I don't want to cover all of that white that's already on there. I just want to kind of give it a two-toned look. I don't want to necessarily cover it all up. I don't plan to embellish this piece any other way. I really want the butterflies to be the hero here. I only needed one coat of that paint, and once it was dry, I came back with a polyacrylic sealer to seal off all the paint and get it ready for my butterflies, which you now see on the right side of my project, and they are just gorgeous. Wait till you see them on this piece. I positioned my butterflies onto my project kind of in a floating manner, not necessarily uniform. I'm not looking for centered or anything. I just kind of want them to be as if they were floating in the sky. Once I have that kind of positioned where I want, I grab my Type Bond Quick and Thick, and I am just going to put it across the back of each of those butterflies, spreading it out so that there's not too many clumps and none of that glue comes through. And then place it down and set it aside to dry, and this project is done. I got this beautiful small tote from Shelly at Repurpose My Way. I ordered it off of her Etsy shop and I love it so much. I really wanted to use that apothecary and use it up because I was down to just the last little bit. I even had to spray it with some water to kind of unthicken the paint a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a heavy dry brush coat of that apothecary. I'm going right over that black, or I'm sorry, that green that was already on it. I did give the entire tote a quick spray with Rust-Oleum Clear Matte to seal in any of that paint that was already on the piece. I will be using some transfers from the Katarina Transfer Set by IOD. This was part of the new 2025 spring release, and I am going to start with those birds that are on that first page. I'm going to remove that backer sheet, place down my transfer where I want it to go, and then use the transfer stick that comes with the pack to rub on this transfer. I do like to work in a slow motion going up or down, but starting at an edge and working my way all the way up, using my finger underneath the transfer sheet or the backer sheet to kind of help move things along. This was a little bit harder to do on this piece specifically, only because I had not yet or no, I lied. I did seal it. I sealed it with one coat of these matte spray paint, but sometimes I feel that when you use the polyacrylic sealer, you get a little bit easier of a transfer. It wasn't terrible, as you can see. I'm almost done, and this is not sped up, but I just noticed it was a little bit more difficult than I probably would have gotten with a polyacrylic sealer. I'm going to embellish the other side with these beautiful pink flowers. And then as I move towards the longer sides of the box, I do feel that I'm going to need more than just the flowers to help it look a little bit more finished and filled in on those sides. I decided to use the Veranda stamp set by IOD and my IOD Stone Gray ink to kind of embellish the background of this box. I didn't want anything super stark or obvious. I just wanted something subtle, but something that helped tie everything in because the flowers, while they are beautiful, I didn't want them, I didn't want too many of them, and I felt it was too small to be by itself on those sides. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp both sides of this, and then I'll come back with my extra two flowers to finish off this piece. The last step is to seal in that transfer to make sure that it is more permanent. So I'm going to be using some clear wax over the entire piece, and I'm also going to be getting that bottom part of the box. This is actually one that I had not sealed yet, mainly because I don't even remember if I had painted it until after I did the transfer. So either way, everything's getting sealed with a clear wax, and then this piece is done. Since I still had some of that apothecary left, I grabbed this rolling pin that I have left over from a project that was started and never finished. It had been painted in white in the middle, and then the sides, I believe, are painted in Eden, which is one of the new DIY paint colors from December. And I, again, wanted to give it a touch of spring and also kind of have it flow together with the other two pieces we just created to kind of maybe put together a little vignette. I'm just going to paint those two handles in Apothecary by DIY, and then once that's dry, we'll come back in and embellish the middle part. I haven't done a lot of rolling pins on my channel before, but I have been wanting to do this specific method for a while. So I'm going to go ahead and ink it up with some IOD black ink. This is my stamp pad that is not as juicy. I feel like in a recent video you guys saw when I had just filled it, it was like extra juicy. This is actually the opposite because I was worried about any kind of bleed through. Once I have it stamped up, I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to roll towards me. And I'm using the, I think it's Brambles and Berries IOD stamp set. And I go to right when I see it, stop on my piece, and I turn around and perfect. So that's all we need to do. All I need to do now is just seal up those handles. I had this other rolling pin that I had done originally around Christmas time. I did the same rolling method with this rolling pin using the Kindest Regards stamp set by IOD. And now I'm just going to be painting the handles in Gypsy Green. It's giving me another type of spring vibe, but not as pastel, I guess. Gypsy Green is also another color I'm trying to use up in this video. So let's see if I can conquer both of these DIY paints today. Even with that dark red, I really only needed the one coat on both handles. And then I decided to seal this up with some clear wax and then some dark wax on top. You want to make sure you're using the clear wax first, just because it'll be a little bit harder to wipe any of that dark wax back. It makes it a little bit easier to maneuver and almost kind of erase if you end up feeling like you put too much on. Okay, here's a fun little game. Comment below and let me know if you have any idea what this is. I will give you a hint. It is not a breadboard, and it is something that I brought home from school. So I already have some, what is it, Coffee Bean by Dixie Belle, which has been mixed with like a texturizer to kind of create that bumpy effect on the one side. I am just going to paint this side with that Apothecary, and then I'll come in and I'll do the Apothecary on the other side as well. One of the things I absolutely love about the DIY paint is I can use my heat gun to kind of make this process go a little faster. It is easy to clean up, wet distress, kind of fix, I guess, compared to an all-in-one paint. So that's why these paints were my feature in today's video. I wanted to get a lot done in a short amount of time. Once I have this completely dried, I do let it cool for a little bit before I move on. Here's where I'm testing my artistic skills. I am trying to create kind of a set of branches because I'd like to transfer on a bird onto this piece. So I'm using some Little Black Dress. I think this one on the left is Hazelwood by DIY, and I am trying to create some branches. Now, one of the things I keep trying to do is make sure that the branch that I create is positioned in a way where it looks like that little bird is sitting on the branch. it goes okay, I guess. I did come in with some white, as you can see here. I ended up, in the end, not really liking any of it, but I sanded it back a bit and I did like that outcome. So the branches are still there, just a little bit more distressed than what you see right here. This is where you can see how I wet distress back most of that paint. I was originally going to clean it completely. I had already sealed that apothecary underneath. I think I forgot to mention that, sorry. But I ended up seeing how it looked when it was distressed like that, and I was like, you know what, we can work with this. So I kind of left it as is, distressed it back as much as I could, and then left some of those pieces kind of messy coated in there, and then just came in with my transfer. Here are the two little birds that I decided on. This is a transfer set by Redesign with Prima. I will leave it linked below. I got this off of the Reclaimed Ranch, off of Tara's website. And I am going to start by transferring on that red bird at the top and then having the other one perched down below. When I chose these birds, I wanted to not only make sure they looked appropriate, kind of sitting on these distressed branches I created, but also I didn't want to lose any of the detail, especially towards the tails. So I went back and forth with a bunch of the birds that were part of this set and finally decided that these two would be able to be positioned on there appropriately and also not lose any of the gorgeous detail in the bird. Using these transfers is going to be very similar to what you do with the IOD transfers. A couple of things that will be different. I believe the Redesign with Prima transfers do not have that grid on the back of them the same way you would see with the IOD transfers. And the Redesign with Prima transfers do come with a wooden stick. The only reason I don't use them is I feel like when I first started crafting with transfers, I had the wooden stick and I felt like, if I remember correctly, and I don't know if this was redesign, I just remember having a wooden stick that had been stained and some of that stain had gotten onto my project. So when I got the IOD transfer sticks, I just kind of save them in bulk and grab those and use them anytime I'm doing a transfer. Again, that's just personal preference. There's not one that's better than the other. However, if you are a redesign stockist and there is a reason that they sell the wooden one instead, I would love to know, because just out of curiosity, it could be that there's a reason that that one is used over this plastic one that I get with IOD. I'm sealing this up with a polyacrylic sealer in a matte finish. This is Minwax polyacrylic sealer. And once that is done, I let it dry, wrap some twine around the top, and we are done. Have you guessed yet? What is this thing that I just upcycled into some beautiful home decor? Next up, I have this cork board that has already been painted in black. I did attempt to use an inlay on this a little while back and it did not go well, so I pushed it to the side because that's what I do. And now I'm actually going to be finishing this project. I'm taking that gypsy green and I'm going to cover the entire piece, front and back, with this color. I do end up needing 2 coats of this paint to fully cover it, and then we'll come back and wet distress. I'm doing what I call like a heavy wet distress on this piece because I really want to bring back as much of that black as I can. I loved the look of that, having that black against that green. I thought it would look really nice. It's not necessarily a style that I typically would do, but I know that things like this have sold for me very well in the past, and I absolutely loved these 2 colors together. So once I have this done, I'm going to go ahead and embellish that top part that does not have the cork board. You'll see that this bottom part does have the cork board, and I did paint it, but it is fully functional. I just didn't want to put a transfer on it because if people are going to poke little pins in it, it would ruin the transfer. So we're just going to go ahead and use the transfer on the top. And at this point in the project, I just want to assure you that I have already sealed the entire piece with a polyacrylic sealer and it is dry. And now I'm just going to take this adorable little set of birds. It's another one from the Katarina transfer set by IOD, and transfer them onto that top of the piece. You'll see here how much easier this is to do when you have your piece sealed with a polyacrylic sealer as compared to the Rust-Oleum matte spray. I find this to be a much faster method, I guess, in the end for making sure that your transfer goes down quickly. So that is just something I noticed, and you can see here it's not very hard for me to get this transferred on. Again, it might just be me. It could be that it works really well for other people. I also think the project itself is a little easier. The other piece that I had, that tote that I did earlier in this video, it was very, very rough on the sides. It had a very rustic look. So this one is much more smoothed out, and that could be another thing that made it different. I envisioned this little bulletin board or cork board in a kitchen, and so I thought I would go ahead and give this a matching pencil holder or pen holder for this. This is a set of several wooden pencil holders that I got in bulk off of Amazon. And I'm going to start by painting it in a watered down Oakum by Fusion. So this is an all-in-one paint, but I kind of mixed it half and half with some water to create this kind of paint wash effect that I'm using as a base on my project. When you have too many projects going at one time, these are some things that happen. I forgot to record me painting, but you've seen me paint a lot in this video, so I painted it and wet distressed it back a little bit. It is painted in gypsy green and has already been sealed. And now I'm going to use these extra transfers that I have from the Lost Garden transfer set by IOD to embellish my piece. Whenever I have a project that has like a corner or an edge, I do like to start in that spot because I do think it helps the transfer kind of come off of that backer sheet a little easier. This is especially critical with a transfer like this, where you have these teeny tiny little pieces that you are transferring on. So you kind of have to sometimes work with like the tip of that transfer stick versus the entire base. It was a little bit more cumbersome than maybe doing a bigger transfer that is all in one, but it does come off pretty easily. Like I said, having everything sealed first helps, and kind of working yourself around those edges helps as well. I think it's also important not to think too much about how to position your pieces or how to choose your pieces, especially with a transfer set like this Lost Garden one. It is very easy to overanalyze every little piece to know when to make the right cut because you will probably have to cut parts of the transfer out, not necessarily to remove them from the project, but because all the vines are wrapped together, you're able to cut it so it can almost be the end of one piece of the transfer and the beginning of another. This is something that I think those of us who try to be perfectionists when it comes to stuff like this, we kind of get lost in overanalyzing it. So one suggestion that I would make to you is to just go ahead, find some colors that coordinate, and then just place it anywhere because the purpose of this lost garden is that all of these vines and leaves and flowers are all kind of mixed together in this lost abandoned area. That's kind of how I envision it. So that's what I would suggest to you to help yourself get done faster because that's what I keep having to remind myself. Now we have a beautiful matching piece for our corkboard. I have this very long piece of scrap wood that has been sitting in my stash. It has already been painted in white, and I already painted or put the decoupage medium onto it and let it dry. We will now be using this napkin that I got off of Amazon. I actually got a big pack of them, so it is one of the free napkins you will get to decoupage with if you order that deal. 5 Connie Lines and Designs papers, and you will get a pack of decoupage napkins. I am going to use the wet distress, or I'm sorry, the wet artist brush method to take apart this napkin. And one of the things that I realized as I was starting to position this onto my piece is that I had to be very careful about a couple things. Not only the position of the birds that are there, but also it's the exact same like look all the way across the napkin. So the only way that I could get it to not look too obviously like it's like a repeated pattern was to kind of set it up in a way where a different bird was on each section, I guess. So it was kind of like in a pattern of like every other. So I had the top bird and then the bottom bird and then the top bird and the bottom bird on this piece. Now I'm actually going to attempt to decoupage a napkin without using the iron-on method. I am using the Fusion decoupage gel and I'm going to lay it down. I am not using a misting bottle for this. I have tried in the past thinking it would be helpful and it ended up making my napkin bleed. I'm already nervous enough about that happening, so I am not going to do that with this piece. I lay down my piece after I've got the decoupage medium all the way down that one part, and then I'm going to come in with my decoupage medium and have it wiped over the top of the project and laying it down. As I move on to the next piece of napkin, I'm going to overlap the two a little bit. And the best part about this napkin is that it is so like camouflaged, I guess, like in the back. It has so many kind of details going on that it is very easy for you to do the overlap and not have it be super obvious. Another thing I just had to kind of embrace and be okay with is that there will be wrinkles. And again, this napkin lends itself to having those wrinkles be as masked as possible. You really can't tell as I work through this where those wrinkles are. They kind of just flow with the style of the napkin, which is perfect. That's exactly what I need, especially for somebody who is so nervous about decoupaging with napkins without using that iron-on method. I set everything aside to dry thoroughly. I probably left it overnight, and now I'm coming in the next day and I'm using my finger sander and working in a downward motion with napkins. Unlike Connie's paper that we had used earlier in today's video, you will need to be more careful. Staying in that downward motion or very lightly going off to the side, like you see me doing in the parts of the napkin that maybe got a little stuck, is what you're going to have to think through so that you don't end up ripping some of the part of the napkin that you want to be on your project still. So it actually, again, works out very well. Making sure everything is completely dry is another key element here so that you don't end up accidentally ripping or tearing any of the decoupage paper you want to keep on there. I had so much success with that decoupage gel by Fusion that I didn't stop and try something new here. I decided to cover the project one more time with that gel before I finished off this piece. I do believe I went back one more time with a sealer. I think it was a Varathane, just to make sure that it was more durable because I am going to turn this into a key hook or a hanger of sorts. Before I work out where the key hooks are going to go, I do end up screwing sawtooth hangers onto the back of my project, both on the right-hand side and the left-hand side, in order to make it even and more durable. I was really worried about using anything else to try to keep this up. Once I finish with that, I am going to decide, or I do decide, that I want those key hooks to actually be coming down from the base or from the bottom of this piece of wood rather than having them screwed into the front where that decoupage napkin is. I take out my what do you call it, tape measure, and I am going to find the middle, the exact center of this piece, which is obviously at 12 inches, and then I'm going to go in two to the left and two to the right in the same separation. So it'll be at 4 inches, 8 inches, and 12 inches, and then again 4 and 8 inches. Once I have all of my points measured out and marked, I come in with my drill and drill holes on in the middle first and then down each side so that they are each about 4 inches apart. I do end up having to use something to help me get the hooks screwed all the way in, but I'm glad that it was nice and tight like that. I definitely want this to be durable. A little trick if you ever have trouble hanging your pieces, I always take a piece of tape. This is some painter's tape, and I am marking on in the middle of each of those sawtooth hangers right where I want to be able to nail it to the wall. And you can see here, I was able to get it very level with this method. I am not the best about this kind of stuff, so this method has worked very well for me. It is definitely a trick I learned from YouTube, not something I made up myself. Next, I have a Melissa and Doug little bin. I think I've upcycled at least 5 of these. I have a ton of them and I still have more left. My kids have a lot of Melissa and Doug toys that they are now done with in life. So I have already painted the front of it. I actually used a mix. I wish I had recorded it. I thought I did, but I don't know what happened. I did a beautiful blend of a White Swan by DIY as well as the Gypsy Green and created this gorgeous green that is not the apothecary kind of green that we saw earlier in the video, but a little bit more of a, I don't know if it's a deeper green. I really liked it. Let's just say that. And now I'm taking these half beads and I'm going to be gluing them onto the base of this. What I'm going to be creating is a trinket tray. Here's a look at that a beautiful blended greenish whitish paint that I created, or that background. And now I'm going to be using some more of those scraps. I don't know if you call them scraps, but the vines from the Lost Garden transfer set. And I am positioning them kind of in an ongoing motion onto this tray and just leaving enough space because I do want to add a bird onto the tray as well. These Lost Garden transfers are from IOD, and I believe the bird that I end up using is from Redesign with Prima. It's part of that same bird set that I got from Tara's website. Once I have everything transferred down and burnished in, I'm going to come in with my clear wax, and I am going to cover the entire piece as well as the sides and bottom of my box. And here's a look at our finished project. I think this last project is by far my favorite. This is several pieces of scrap wood that I have already adhered together. I used some popsicle sticks to adhere them together, and they have been painted. Obviously, it looks like they've been painted for fall. That's exactly what they were painted for. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to paint the entire piece in Plaster by Fusion to give it a good base coat for what I'm going to do next. I did end up using 2 coats of that Fusion plaster paint, which is an all-in-one paint. So I did have to come in with my finger sander and really sand it down a little bit to bring back some of that brown that was underneath. I didn't want to go too hard because I am not really trying to get that orange to come through. I just wanted to get some of the brown and make it look a little bit more distressed. Now I'll be using these 3 little birds. This is one of the Connie Lines and Designs papers that I have on my website. It is available right now, and I had sold out of it, and now I actually do have more in stock, and I needed to save one for myself because I've wanted to use this since I saw it originally when I first ordered all the papers that I needed to for my website. I am going to be using that Fusion decoupage gel. It is out right now. I just decided, and I was curious to see how it worked with the Connie papers that I'm using. I haven't used it yet. I think I've used some of the other decoupage mediums, but I don't know that I had used Fusion yet until this weekend. I am going to start with my starter strip, mist by paper, and then work my way across, slowly rubbing it down. Again, you can be a little bit more heavy-handed with it because it is a very tough paper. I also wanted to make sure I had enough of that medium on there, but because the Fusion paint is already sealed, it is not going to be soaking up as much of that decoupage medium as maybe the DIY paint would. So once I have that all down, I let that dry and then we'll come back in with the next step. See this wood cutout that I created on my laser cutter? Well, those holes that are inside those handles, I used those pieces to create some leaves for my project. I am using a mix of that gypsy green and some white paint to create a kind of a blend onto my leaves. Now, this was a white paint that I got from Sonnet's Maker's Box, and they are not labeled, so I can't remember whether it was vintage linen or if it was white swan. But as I'm watching this back, I also remembered that I have this other green paint, which is actually a mix of cake batter and water lily by DIY that I use to create that more sagey looking green. So I'm kind of pulling together all of these colors to kind of create a blended effect. Definitely not as amazing as the leaves that are on the decoupage paper, but I wanted to come up with something to kind of expand upon what was already on that paper. Once those were dry and sealed, I brought them back and positioned them onto my project in different places to kind of have them look like sprouts or twigs that were all around these little birds. I also have a little sign that I cut out using my laser cutter and engraved that says tiny but mighty, and I just feel like that was the perfect little saying for these three birds. I'm gluing all of these leaves down with some Tite Bond Quick and Thick, and then I'm going to come back with some more brown and black paint to create some more branches along the bottoms of, sorry, those three other leaves that are on the right hand side of my project. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Please comment below, let me know which one was your favorite. This is definitely mine.